Thank you very much, Arvind and Suman. It's really a great pleasure to be here. I think one of the advantages of moving from the software industry, where the average age is 27, to public life is you go from being called as very old to very young. So I think that's an unexpected byproduct of this move. So let me briefly, this evening I'll talk about Aadhaar and its role in inclusive growth, and I'll try to give an update of what we're trying to do here, and we have tried to keep this as visual as possible so that it doesn't get heavy on the eyes. So let me start by saying that what is the context for this? The first context is obviously address the challenge of inclusion, because we do know that there are many people in India who don't have an acknowledged existence by the state. They don't have a form of ID, they don't have a birth certificate, or they don't have a school certificate, they don't have an address. And because they don't have this acknowledgement of existence, they're not able to participate and get access to public services. This is one very fundamental issue that we have. And if we truly want inclusive growth, then we owe it to all these people who are outside the system in some sense to be part of the system in a formal sense. And therefore, the first major purpose of this whole thing is to give them an identity number, which is essentially a way that their existence can be acknowledged. But along with that is the need to make it a nationally mobile and portable number, because it's not sufficient to give a number. It's required that this number be valid across the country, because you have a country where there's a lot of migration. We have over 100 to 120 million migrants. And in the coming 20 years, thanks to urbanization and climate change and demographic changes, the number of migrants is going to go up by a few more 100 million. And today, they don't really have one national ID which they can travel with. And this has a huge impact. If you have a person who comes as a migrant from a village in Bihar to Delhi, that person does not have any acknowledgement of existence, and therefore they can't really get access to public service and so forth. So inclusion, both from the fundamental view of giving people an acknowledgement of existence, as well as addressing the challenge of mobility, is the first big thing that drives the need for this Aadhaar number or a unique ID. The second thing is the collateral issue of improving the efficiency and effectiveness of public services, because public services increasingly in India are oriented towards individuals. So whether it's a job in NREGA or a PDS allotment to a family, or an old age pension, a widow's pension, or a maternal benefit, or a payment to a woman to have an in-hospital delivery, all of them involve directly connecting to a person. And what is now becoming increasingly apparent is that our databases of individuals who are there in the system has a lot of challenges in terms of duplicates, frauds, and so forth. And as we increase government expenditure on these programs, it's very important that they reach the right people more effectively. And therefore, the second big value of Aadhaar is that it allows essentially housekeeping of databases of beneficiaries to make sure that genuine beneficiaries are there and ghosts and duplicates are not there in the database. And the third important dimension is that it provides an online identity. And I think online identity is very important, because it's not just about having an ID number or an ID card. It is having an ID which works online, which works on the mobile network or works on the internet, and which online identity can be verified at a point of transaction. In other words, when you go to receive some service or a product, if your identity needs to be authenticated, then you can do that online. So these are basically the three big drivers: the driver of identity and mobile identity, which is available throughout the country; the driver of improving government and public service delivery so that genuine beneficiaries get the service; and thirdly, to provide an online identity which can be used for authentication at the point of service delivery. So our mandate is basically to provide a unique number to everyone in India, which means, as per today's census, 1.2 billion people. Collect very basic information, both biometric and demographic, and also, most importantly, using technology, ensure that a person gets only one number. Because one of the challenges we have had in many of our ID systems is a large number of duplicates, because people apply under different names or juxtaposition of different initials, and that essentially vitiates against the quality of the database. So because we use the biometrics, which gives us a unique signature, we are able to ensure that a person gets only one number, and therefore it's basically to give a unique number. And then, of course, because of the online nature of the ID, offer online authentication across the country that we have. Now, just to summarize, so we will give a number. The important thing is that the number is important, not the card. We do send a letter to them saying this is your number, but the value comes in the number. We make sure there's no duplicates. We have standard attributes. We have essentially created a database which has biometrics and demographics, which is stored centrally in our system. And the number itself is a 12-digit number with, essentially it's a random number. So you can't choose your number, you get whatever number you get, and it's randomly generated so that everybody has a different number. The information that we collect are things like name, address, gender, and date of birth. And we also ask for name and address verification documents where appropriate, a photo, 10 fingerprints, and the iris image, that is both the eyes. So 10 fingerprints is a 4-4-2, so it's a 3-step process to capture the fingerprints. Now, this is how an iris looks like. And what happens is that you can digitize the pattern there, and you get a very, very unique pattern of biometrics. And that's really, and what each of these patterns is distinct from the next. So the combination of the iris pattern along with the next one, which is the fingerprints, again, essentially you can capture what is called as the minutiae template, which gives all the various attributes of the fingerprint. So this combination of the iris pattern and the fingerprint pattern essentially gives us the uniqueness across 1 billion people. So fundamentally, we take the name, address, gender, and date of birth. To that, we add the photo, the iris, and the fingerprints, and we get a unique number for each person. That's at a very fundamental level what we are doing. And this is, of course, very sophisticated and complex technology, but at the end of the day, it makes sure that you get a unique number. Now, what we have done is we have built this as an ecosystem, because the challenge we had when we started the project was, how do we get scale? And how do we get 1.2 billion people in? How do you get speed? How do you do this rapidly and not spend 40 years doing this stuff? How do you get quality so that everybody has the same quality of number and authentication? And how do we do it inexpensively so that we don't spend too much money? So what we did was we have standardized the whole ecosystem. So the standards for enrollment, standards for biometrics, standards for verification, standards for data field. And basically we have tools to allow other people to connect into our system. And these other agencies we call in the first instance as registrars. And registrars are partners who help us to enroll people into our database and who in turn use the authentication services that we have. Today we have over 65 registrars that include state governments, banks, insurance companies, oil companies, universities, and so forth. And this is what gives us scale and speed, because if you want to enroll 1 billion people, we use all our registrars as partners to do the enrollment. So it's a very important architecture. So if you look at our ecosystem, we have the UIDAI database in the center. We have all these registrars who are, as I said, over 60 entities, essentially government or public sector entities. They in turn hire enrolling agencies who actually do the enrollment on the ground, who in turn touch the resident. That's how the whole thing works. So let's say we have 60 registrars. If each of them goes and puts out 100 enrollment stations, then you end up having 6,000 enrollment points. And if each enrollment point is enrolling anywhere from 10 to 50 people, then you have a few 100,000 enrollments. And that's how we get the scalability of this approach. So this is another visual of the same thing, which is that we have the database, we have all these registrars like states, LIC, oil ministry, and so forth, and they in turn have branches where the enrollment happens. So in effect, what we have done is, rather than creating our own infrastructure of enrollment, we're using existing agencies of the government, public and state government, to essentially leverage their presence to be able to enroll people very quickly. Now, to do that, you need to have a standardized enrollment process, because whether enrollment is done in a village in Chhattisgarh for NREGA, or whether it's done for a bank in Nariman Point or an LPG connection in Bangalore, all of them have to go through the same enrollment process. And that's where, again, the technology comes in, because we have a standardized enrollment process which we provide to our agencies, so they use the same software, the same devices, and so forth, so that the enrollment process experience is uniform. And creating that uniformity has been key to this whole model, because everybody, so we have a whole ecosystem. We have about 6,000 to 10,000 operators who have been trained. They're training, they go through a certification process, they have a quality process, and so on. So the whole idea is to scale it up at the same time, preserving quality, and having a standardized software is very, very important for that purpose. This is a typical enrollment kit. These are, as I said, there are maybe 6,000 enrollment kits out there. You have a laptop, you have a second monitor for the person to see the data about themselves which is being entered. You have a camera to capture the picture. You have an iris scanner to capture the iris. You have a fingerprint slap scanner to capture the 10 fingerprints. And you have an enrollment kit box, which all of this comes in. And what's interesting is that because this is an open architecture, our enrollment agencies have been able to innovate around this and create different models, made it more ergonomic, made it cheaper. And that's one of the reasons that we have a very thriving ecosystem on enrollment kits. This is a typical setup which is there. This again is an actual field photograph. And this shows you the actions. On one side, you have a person's iris capture happening. And in the bottom right-hand side, you have the fingerprints being captured. So these are actually photographs of how it happens on the ground. Now, right now, enrollments are happening across the country. Enrollments began in September of 2010, and they're happening from Tripura to Jharkhand to Maharashtra to Himachal Pradesh to Andhra Pradesh to Karnataka. So all over the country, enrollments are happening, and every day enrollments are picking up steam. Now, this shows you the enrollment status as of this morning. So we have a real-time portal which updates the status of enrollment every day. And we have about, if you look at the portal, this portal is available on our website. If you go to the UIDAI website, there's a portal which gives real-time data, which means as and when enrollments happen, it's getting updated on this. So you're taking transparency to a whole new level of real-time thing. And if you look at this, you'll see that Andhra Pradesh is at about close to 1.3 million enrollments. Karnataka is 1.2 million. Tripura is about 430,000. So what we are doing is we are building a complete transparency portal on this, which is a byproduct of the process. So every day you will get real-time data. You can go and check how much by enrollment agency, how much by which district in Hyderabad, how much by which ward. So all kinds of slicing and dicing can be done. And this data is also available in machine-readable format, so you can do your own analysis on this data. So essentially, we are following the standards of this open data governance, which is now coming up. So that. The next slide, which is also from our portal, shows you the enrollment process. Basically, you can see the cumulative enrollment and how it is picking up steam since we launched it in September. Today, we are enrolling at about 100,000 plus a day, and we have more than 6,000 enrollment stations that are live across the country. We have a huge training and awareness program with our registrar partners. This is an example of a session happening in one of our states. Now, we have a lot of challenges. You'll notice that on the top side, one, we have a handicapped, differently abled person getting enrolled. We have a child getting enrolled. We have an old lady getting enrolled, and her head has to be held up so that the iris can be done. You can see the kind of people who are lining up that. Some of the challenges are age. Some of the other challenges we have is the fingerprints have often got, they're not very good quality, which is why we are doing this combination of iris and fingerprint. Then a big focus on reaching out to the marginalized. We work with many marginalized groups. We work with the homeless in Delhi, with the differently abled in Karnataka, with transgender in Puducherry, and so forth. Idea is to really make sure people who normally don't get identity are given their identity numbers. This is a transgender person getting enrolled, and they, in fact, they've been very happy that we have taken such a lead on getting them enrolled. And this gives you an idea of the scale of enrollment, because everywhere, so at this point, 6,000 enrollment stations which are live across the country have crowds of people coming in, getting forms, and so on and so forth. And so it's a huge challenge of scale and reach. And you can see the kind of people who are coming. There's a huge demand for getting this number because they believe it will give them access. Now, what happens is when you enroll, the enrollment data is sent to us. We do the checking. If it's a duplicate, we reject it. If it's correct, we give the number, and we send a letter. This letter is the front and the back of the letter, and this letter is sent, again, we have a very sophisticated letter dispatching system where we provide digital files to the post office, which sorts them by zip code, and then creates individual bags of letters right down to the last post office and delivers it. And this is an actual letter delivery which is happening in Jharkhand, where the postman is going around and giving these Aadhaar letters to everyone. Our commitment is that within a few weeks of enrolling, you get the letter in the mail. This also helps in addressing the issue of addresses. One of the challenges in India is we don't have a systemic address database. So, or one of the byproducts of this is naming conventions, road names, street names, PIN codes, all that will get cleaned up as a byproduct of this process. This is the first enrollment which we did in Maharashtra in September when we had the national launch by the Prime Minister and the chairperson of the UPA government. Now, this is the enrollment. So broadly, I've explained the enrollment story to you, and the idea is that over the next, we started enrollment end of September. We have crossed 4 million, as I showed you in that real-time graph. And by October, we should be enrolling at the rate of 1 million a day. And our goal is by 2014 to have 600 million people enrolled into the system. That's the goal. But it's, as I said, enrollment is just one part of the game. The value of this is it provides the online ID, online authentication. And what the online authentication does is simply, if you go to a particular point of service and you say, I am this person, and that other person says, prove it to me that you're this person, then you can do an online request to our database to say, is he the person he claims to be? And the answer you will get from a database is a yes or a no. And this is very important in service delivery, because every service delivery, whether it's a banking service, a PDS service, or NREGA payment, or whatever, all of them finally boil down to, are you the person you claim to be before you unlock the service? And therefore, having this identity authentication allows you to create a whole set of services based on online identity. So this is a very important part of what we're doing. Now, these are examples of authentication devices. Again, it's an open architecture, which means that different manufacturers, for example, it could be a mobile phone, it could be a small handheld device, it could be a ruggedized device for high altitude environments. This again is, because it's an open architecture, innovation can happen here. So we already have multiple vendors all developing these devices. So this will become more and more sophisticated over time. There will be mobile phones, there could be laptops, there could be tablets. It doesn't really matter. But this will essentially be driven through innovation. And because again, it's just an open kind of thing. Anybody who writes to the specifications that we have published on our website can plug into this network. So what does this do? It provides ID valid across India, which allows you to have multiple applications. And this is a key conceptual difference between the way we are implementing it from anywhere in the world, which is that most ID programs are embedded with for example, a passport is both an ID as well as a document for international travel. A PAN card is both an ID and a number for paying your taxes. What we have done here is we have separated out the identity infrastructure from the application infrastructure. So basically, using the same ID, you can use it for banking services or education services or health services or mobile service and so forth. And that's really the sort of the architectural difference of what we are doing here. And basically, you can link it to a bank account, link it to a cell phone, and do authentication anywhere. So this is a very different way of implementing identity, which we think is the basis for future applications and benefits. So broadly, you can think of what we're doing is building the identity infrastructure, which you can think of as a soft infrastructure. I mean, you may build roads and highways, but this is a soft infrastructure that gives low-cost identity across the country, on top of which you can build a financial inclusion infrastructure. In other words, you can now have bank accounts associated with the Aadhaar numbers, and then you can provide these open APIs, so you can build applications on top of this that allow people to remit money. For example, if you have a program of giving pensions, and let's say there are 10,000 pension holders in a particular state, who get old age pension, and you have a process of identifying that these people who are above 65 on the BPL list get old age pension, then you can essentially create a very simple way of making sure the money is sent to the 10,000 people's accounts using this infrastructure. And on the other side, you can create an infrastructure for them to go and withdraw the money after authenticating themselves. So it allows you both sending the money to them as well as withdrawal is made far more convenient. And so you can build many, and you can, whether it's pensions, whether it's any payments. So basically, I think we think this is a big enabler for inclusive growth, because it addresses identity, it addresses access to services, mobility. We have a special program to reach out to marginal groups, as well as, of course, it gives direct benefits, because once you have an ID for a person, you can directly send them any benefit that you want. Now, the good news is that in the last 4 or 5 months, the Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance has accepted the Aadhaar number as a KYC for opening a no-frills bank account. Now, this is very, very important, because one of the challenges of the poor is they can't open bank accounts because they don't have an ID. And now if they get an Aadhaar number, they can automatically open a bank account. So this really makes opening bank accounts very simple. And we expect that there'll be a large number of bank accounts opened in the coming years, because Aadhaar allows them to open a bank account. And along with the other thing which I described, which is the point of distribution, they can also withdraw money from their account or deposit money. Also, the Department of Telecommunications has notified that the Aadhaar number is sufficient proof of identity for getting a mobile connection. This again is very, very important, because over time, getting a mobile connection is becoming more and more onerous because of ID requirements. But if you have an Aadhaar number, you can get a mobile connection. And you can get it online, which means I can walk into a Kirana store, authenticate myself, and get my SIM card. And that's all that I need to do. So that reduces transaction cost for people to get these services. And we expect to see other applications to follow. The state of Tripura has notified that Aadhaar is the POI, proof of ID, proof of address for all government services. And we expect other state governments to also start doing that. So over time, it will become an acceptable ID online for a whole host of things. Now, using this, we have built a platform for what we call as inclusive banking, which basically the challenge we have in India is how do you reach money to the people in an elegant manner, because you don't have enough bank branches, so a person in a village doesn't have access. So we have built a model where essentially monies can go from any bank, any amount to any person, which we can withdraw from any business correspondent using any device. Basically, it's an interoperable network. And this is very at the heart of delivering benefits to the people in a very simple manner. To give an example, if you have a person, say, getting this old age pension in a village, now today, even if you put the 400 rupees into the bank account, if the bank branch is 40 kilometers away, you haven't done much for the person, because they had to actually travel to withdraw the money. In tomorrow's model, that village will have a business correspondent of a bank who will have a device which we call as a micro ATM. And that person, once they get a notification that the pension has come, they walk into the nearest bank branch, nearest business correspondent, authenticate themselves, withdraw some money from which will be given by the cash of the grocery store or whatever, and on the system, their account will get debited and the grocery store account will get credited. So in effect, you can create every outlet as a low-cost ATM for the poor, and that essentially will give, suddenly you'll give a huge reach for delivering financial services and other services to people. So we have basically, this architecture is right now rolling out, and we have already done pilots of this in various states, and we will be rolling it out in a big way in the coming 12 months. Once you have this, the Aadhaar number, the bank account and all that, you can also use that to deliver subsidies. Subsidies, as we know, have huge challenge of leakage and so on. I'm currently heading a task force set up in the last by the finance minister to look at how subsidies can be streamlined and given as direct subsidies for 3 products, for kerosene, LPG, and fertilizer. And the goal is, how do we use this infrastructure to deliver the subsidy? Now, the subsidy need not be a cash subsidy. It can be a kerosene voucher, or it can be a LPG voucher, so that the only thing you can buy with that is that product. But that whole thing can again be built using the same technology. So essentially, you can build a subsidy management system to manage all kinds of subsidies, both cash and non-cash. So fundamentally, we believe that this can be used to drive pro-poor delivery systems with, of course, you have to re-engineer these processes, but you can drive a lot of transparency and efficiency and make the thing much more elegant. So to going back to what I said, we kept our commitment. We had said we'll launch within 18 months. We launched in about 15 months. We are at 4.2 million enrollments, now 100,000 a day. We'll be at 1 million enrollments by October, and we'll do 600 million enrollments by 2014. And then, of course, it should cover the whole country in some time. But given that we visualize that a lot of value is going to be seen by the people, we think that this can be done pretty fast. Now, this is obviously a very complex project because it involves massive change management. It has technology issues, security issues, privacy issues, political issues, scale, adoption. It's a fairly huge project. We hope that we can do everything. So anyway, this is, well, one sec. So as they say in the, in the cartoon, 1 down and 1.2 billion to go. Actually, it's a little better than that. It's 4.2 million down and 1.2 billion to go. So fundamentally, we think that this is adaptable infrastructure which can be used to drive the re-engineering of public services, drive inclusion, and really make public service delivery much more efficient, and as a platform for delivering all the commitments that we have made through various means and using technology in a very, very sort of a progressive manner. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take questions.